Hey guys, and welcome back to Reading with Mo, another episode of my bookshelf tour. Today, the bookshelf specific one that we're going to be looking at is one all the way here on the floor on the very bottom. We are onto the bottom shelves here. Is this one, which you can kind of see, is currently holding my blue/purple spined books. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's living down there and see which ones I have and haven't read, and maybe which books I would like to prioritize for the month of June. I wish there was a way you guys could see that shelf a little bit better, but it's just so close to the floor that it's just not happening. So I will just have to be showing you all of them like I normally do anyway. So the first one we have that was just sitting out in the front was Nobody's Magic by Destiny O. Birdsong. I read this book, I believe it was last month or maybe the month before, and I am going to be on an episode of the Book Solid podcast, which is coming out, I believe, I forget the specific date now, but within the next couple of weeks. And this book I gave 4 stars. It was a book that featured albino women, all from the same area of Shreveport, Louisiana. So if you want my full thoughts on that, you'll have to go ahead and check out that podcast episode that will be coming out soon. Next, we have a young adult contemporary book, and that is Starfish by Akemi Dawn Bowman. I remember really enjoying this book back when I read it. It is following the story of this young girl. She's like in her older teens, I want to say. So we're following Kiko, who is half Japanese. She has this dream of getting into art school, but when that doesn't happen, she ends up having this opportunity to go look at art schools in the West Coast. I remember just around the time that I read it, I just related so much to this book, and I remember really enjoying it. I don't read a lot of young adult fiction, contemporary fiction like this now, but it's one that I do plan on revisiting again in the future, and one that I would highly recommend as well. Then we have a very small but cute book, and that is Almost Midnight by Rainbow Rowell. This is actually just a collection of 2 short stories illustrated by Simone Blocker. I remember the illustrations for this were really cute. Now, I don't really remember those 2 stories. I think there was one that I enjoyed more than the other, but I couldn't really tell you what they're about because it's been a long time since I read this. Then we have a book I have not read, and that is Melmoth, I don't know how you say that, by Sarah Perry. I have not gotten to any Sarah Perry yet. I have had this on my shelves for far too long. I would love to see if she's an author that I'm into, but yeah, I haven't gotten to this one. I believe her books are mostly historical fiction. And excuse me if my voice sounds weird today. I am a little bit stuffy, which is annoying, but we're gonna still proceed on with this video. Next, we have another recent 5-star read, and that was Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukafka. This book follows the story of a convicted serial killer, and we're not just following his perspective as he's on death row, but the perspective of the other women that were involved in his life growing up and during the times when he was committing these murders. I found this book so fascinating, and it's one I would recommend, and I want to eventually go back and reread again. I really enjoy this book, and I need to actually look into other books by this author because of how much I enjoyed this book. We have a nonfiction book I haven't gotten to yet, and that is African Europeans: An Untold History by Olivette Hotel. Some people believe that African Europeans are only like a kind of recent thing, but in this book she goes through and shows how much of a presence that there have been of Africans in Europe for a long time. So I'm really interested in getting to this one. I just don't know when. I hope soon though. The next few I have not gotten to yet. So the first one is She Would Be King by Ryetu Moore. This book has been sitting on my shelves for way too long. In this book we're following this book starts off in a West African village where there's a girl who was cursed at birth and exiled on suspicion of being a witch. She's left for dead but survives and makes it to a plantation in Virginia. I believe this book also is touching on the roots of Liberia and how their history is tied to the history of the United States. I have not gotten to this one, but needs to be soon. As well as we have Pandora's Jar by Natalie Haynes. I really love the cover on this one. This is all about women in the Greek myths. This one I believe is a non-fiction book, and I haven't read anything by Natalie Haynes. I also actually have another book on this shelf by hers I haven't read, which is a fiction book, which is 1,000 Ships. This one I believe is a historical fiction book, and it's centered around the Trojan War. It's something to do. I know she writes a lot about ancient Greek topics, so these books sound like they would probably go well together when I do actually get around to reading them. Then we have The Shape of Water by Guillermo del Toro. I believe this book was actually published after the movie came out. I haven't seen the movie either. The book is by Guillermo del Toro and Daniel Krause. I don't really know too much of it, just from what I have seen from the movie trailers of a girl who falls in love with this sea creature. I don't really want to know much more than that before I go into it. Eventually I'll get to this book. It's just one that I have not really prioritized. We have a nonfiction book that I have read, and that is The Nocturnal Brain, Nightmares, Neuroscience, and the Secret World of Sleep by Guy Leisinger, I think. And I remember really enjoying this nonfiction book, all about different, really learning about all these different things to do with sleep, and it's one that I would actually enjoy rereading again to see if I can get more out of it. The doctor is giving us a sample of conditions that he's had to deal with over the years with his various patients, and all in all I found this very interesting. We have another nonfiction book, and that is The Girl Who Smiled Beads by Clementine Wamaria and Elizabeth Whale. Clementine in this book is telling the story of her and her sister escaping from the Rwandan massacre and eventually ending up in different countries, floating through different refugee camps. It's been a while since I read this one, and it is one that I would like to revisit. Then we have a book I feel so bad that I have not gotten to yet. Actually, this is definitely going to be a priority because it is called Starlight by Hannah Lee Kidder, who I believe is also a booktuber, and she had sent me this when she published this book. It's actually a collection of short stories, and this is in 2020 and it's now 2022, and I have not read it yet, and I feel so bad about it. And it's not even that long of a book, so I definitely am going to prioritize this during this month. Next we have Well Read Black Girl by Glory Edom. Glory Edom is also the founder of the Well Read Black Girl book club. I have actually some of their merch that I have worn in previous videos before that I really love. This is an anthology all collected of original essays by Black women writers. Some of them I had read from and were familiar with, some of them I hadn't, but overall I really enjoyed reading this book and seeing the different connections they had as writers to reading themselves. We have a book I have not gotten to yet, and that is The Unfortunate Importance of Beauty by Amanda Filipacci. And this book takes place in New York City, and we're following this group of artistic friends, which I have not gotten to yet, and it hasn't been a super priority, but I think I did read like the first chapter of this book to see if I was still interested in reading it, and I did like it, so I'm still holding on to it in the hopes that I will reach for it eventually. We have one I have read and I love this edition of, and it's The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4 stars. I did not like The Starless Sea. I really did not like that one, but I did enjoy The Night Circus. So this one is, I don't even remember who published this edition. It might have been Waterstones, but either way it has these very nice blue sprayed edges. So this book takes place in the 1800s, and we're following this magical circus traveling around, and these two people who are a part of it and competing. I don't really remember a lot of the specifics now. It's been a while since I've read this book, but I do remember really enjoying the writing, and I thought it was a very beautifully told story. Then we have An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. I believe this book, yes, I was able to get this book signed by her back in I want to say like 2019, 2020, when I went to a book festival in San Francisco, or actually in Berkeley, I think it was, and I really enjoyed this book. I forgot now that I had heard it was actually going to be adapted into a movie, but I have not actually looked up to see if there's any like updates or news on that. But I do remember really enjoying this book. It was about a marriage where the husband ends up going to jail for something he was falsely accused of. I don't want to say what happens when he gets out because I can't remember now if it's a spoiler or not, but I remember I really enjoyed this book, and I really need to reread this soon. We have another book I read and enjoyed, which was Dominicana by Angie Cruz. This is a really nice Waterstones edition that had these red sprayed edges. We're following Anna, who is from, I believe, the Dominican Republic, and she is 15 years old. She ends up being part of this arranged marriage so that she can come to the United States, and she's married to this guy who's like twice her age. It's her coming of age story, her growing up and dealing with the circumstances that she's ended up in. As far as I can remember, I remember enjoying this book, so that's why I've also kept it on my shelves. And we have a couple books I have not read yet, actually a few here. These 4 I have not read. So that is, the first is Autobiography of a Female Slave by Martha Griffith Brown. In this book, we're following the life story of Anne, a woman born into slavery and forced to undergo untold hardships. We have a very short book, very tiny, cute book. This is part of the Penguin Books Great Ideas collection. Specifically, this one's from Sojourner Truth, Ain't I a Woman? Then we have this really beautiful edition of War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, which I have not read, and is very intimidating because it is such a chunky book. Eventually I will get to it. This is such a beautiful edition. It would be a shame to never read it, but I am, like I said, very intimidated. I did read Anna Karenina years ago. Haven't attempted to reread it since then, but I would like to do that as well. This book is over 800 pages, almost 900 pages, so it's not something that's high top priority for me to get to soon. It's just one of those things I know eventually I will get to. I believe this was the Barnes & Noble's collector's edition. And we have this one I haven't read, which is called Moth by Melody Razak. I really love the design on this book. So it has orange sprayed edges, and this front cover is actually cut out, which reveals this picture of the woman inside. This book takes place in India during the partition, where with everything going on between India and Britain. I have not read this one, but I would like to prioritize it soon because I just feel like it's going to be a really good book. It sounds very interesting from the synopsis. And we have The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, a very controversial book for many who felt that The Handmaid's Tale really didn't need a sequel. I remember reading this right when it came out, and as far as I can remember, I think I thought it was okay. Like, I don't think it was super bad or anything. I remember following a few different perspectives, and there was one that I really didn't like, I think. Then we have one that was a recent read of mine, and that is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This one is a romance story between two authors, I believe it was. And I remember really enjoying my time with this book. And we have a nonfiction book that I have not read yet, and that is Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom by David W. Blight. I'm sure this book is going to be great when I do eventually get to it, but the fact that it is so long is something that's also intimidating to me. This book is almost 800 pages, so I just really have to be in the mood for a very long nonfiction book, or a very long book in general, so eventually I'll get to this. Then we have a book I have gotten to, and that is The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I remember really enjoying this book. I don't remember a lot of the specifics now, but I know I had to do something with this guy escaping from slavery, helping, I think, with the Underground Railroad or something similar to that. But then he also has this, I think it was also kind of like a surreal version story of it, and that he had this power to be able to help people escape. But yeah, it's been so long since I've read this book, I do not remember the specifics. Then we have How to Make Friends with the Dark by Kathleen Glasgow. I really love the cover on this book. This one was I believe, hard-hitting young adult novel. We are following a young teenager. Her name is Tiger, and her dealing with the grief of losing her mother, I believe it was. And I remember this book being, like I said, very hard-hitting and more of a sad book. And we have a nonfiction book called The Diary of a Bookseller by Sean Blythe. I really enjoyed this book, and I had to hunt down this specific copy because I really love the cover on this edition. He owns the bookshop Wig in Wigtown. It's Scotland's largest secondhand bookshop, and I remember really just enjoying reading about him working at and running his own bookshop. And I, as someone who has worked in a bookstore before, felt like I could relate to a lot of the things that he had talked about in his experiences, and it was just very interesting to read about the different customers that came through his store and things that people would buy and stuff. I really enjoyed this, and I feel like this is a good book for those who are book lovers as well. And we have The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali, a book I enjoyed reading. This book mostly takes place in Tehran in the 1950s. We're following this young teenager. Her name is Roya, and she is living through a lot of political upheaval, I remember, during this time. And she's supposed to marry this kid that she was also in love with, but then this violence erupts, and we end up following her decades later, I believe, as she's living in California, as she's had a whole other life with another man. I remember really enjoying this book and it being just as beautiful on the inside as this cover. Then we have The Grace Keepers by Kirsty Logan. I remember someone had sent me this, and now I can't remember who, and I feel bad about that. But I remember really enjoying this book, and we're following this world where the world's flooded and there's this floating circus, and we're following two women who are looking for a home. I really want to reread this again soon because I remember really enjoying the writing. And we have I think this is a middle grade novel, and that is What Mama Left Me by Renee Watson. I really enjoy Renee Watson's writing in general. We're following Serenity, who I believe her mother is dead, her father's gone, and she's starting over at her grandparents' house, which seems strange, and she's basically having to re-figure out her life herself and make new connections with people. I think if I remember right, this book was a little bit more, definitely more on the sad, harder hitting side. I don't remember if I cried or not, but I might have when I read this book. Then we have a mystery book, and that is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, which I feel like you could put into that whole social horror category. And we're following Sydney Green, who was born and raised in Brooklyn, and she is watching as her neighborhood is being gentrified. She ends up striking up this friendship with a guy who is her neighbor who does these like walking tours, and deep diving into the history becomes something that leads into paranoia and fear on her part. It may not be that things are as they seem and that people just moved out of the area on their own free will. I really enjoyed this book, and I feel like it's definitely different than, because I read another Alyssa Cole book, which I believe her main genre that she writes in is like historical romance. So this one was like a little bit different for her to come out with, but I was pleasantly surprised with this. Then we have, I believe this is a middle grade novel, and it's called The Night Diary by Vera Anandani. This book takes place in 1947. We're following Nisha, who's just turned 12 years old and has received a journal on her birthday. And she lives in India, which has just been freed from British rule and divided into Pakistan and India, where a lot of people are having to cross borders and things, and so we're following her family's journey. I remember this being a very hard-hitting book, a historical middle grade book, but I remember it being a very beautiful one as well. I can't remember if I cried at all during this book. I just might have. Then we have Katherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. This book is very divisive. Some people were really into it, some people weren't. I enjoyed my time with this book, and I feel like it is something I would reach for again, and I want to read whatever Elizabeth Thomas comes out with next. I actually don't even know if this was her debut or not. Yeah, this one was her debut. And this book is very hard to explain. We're following this Katherine House school setting, and we're following our main character who's there, I believe, for like 4 years. It's very, like if you get into the school, it's hard to get into, but you're like pretty much guaranteed to be set for life afterwards. But as the things go on, you see things may not be normal, things may not be right at the school, and things get kind of weird. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this one as well. Last few books that live on this shelf. Two of them I have not read, and they are short story collections. The first one is The Book of Tokyo by a city in short fiction, edited by Michael Emmerich, Jim Hanks, and Masahi Matsu. This book is a collection of short stories all set around Tokyo, and I believe there's a whole bunch of these books in this collection centered around different cities. All of these stories have different authors and different translators, so these books are all actually translated short stories. I have not gotten to it yet, but I really think the cover on this is very beautiful. And then the other one that I have, the other short story collection I haven't gotten to is New Sons, original speculative fiction by people of color, edited by Nisi Shaw. In this anthology, we get to experience a lot of different writing from different authors, and it covers science fiction, fantasy, horror. I think this is really cool, and I'm hoping that this is a really good short story collection so that I can recommend it to you guys to pick up as well. Lastly, but not least, we have Furthermore by Tahara Mafi. I believe this is a middle grade book, and I read this one a long time ago, but I remember really enjoying the writing, and it's something I wouldn't mind revisiting again in the future. I believe we're following this young woman on some sort of adventure journey. It's more of like an adventure story, and I remember really enjoying it, even though like with a lot of these books that it's been a while since I've read, I don't remember a lot of the specifics. So altogether, there are 37 books that lived down on that shelf. Of the 37 books that are on that shelf, I haven't read 15 of them. I'll show you guys the stacks side by side so you can kind of see a comparison of what I have and haven't read. So excuse this weird shaky camera angle, but these are the books that were on that shelf. So I'm actually proud of myself because, as you can see, the pile on the left are the books that I have not gone to yet, and the one on the right are the ones that I have read. So I have read the majority of the books on the shelf, and after this month I'll hopefully have read another, like, or next month I'll have read another 4 or 5 from this stack. So that's it for this video. If you guys are interested in seeing which books from the have not read pile that I'm going to be prioritizing for the month of June, then you'll have to subscribe and stay tuned for my TBR video for the month of June, which will hopefully be going up within the next few days. That's it for this. If there's any books that you've seen that I haven't read that you would want me to prioritize, go ahead and let me know, and I'll take that into consideration when I am just mood reading throughout the month of June. But other than that, that's it. I will see you guys next time. Bye!